You are not suffering because life is harsh, but because you keep surrendering your mind to what you cannot control. You open your day and let judgments form without examination. You react before reason arrives. You seek approval that shifts like sand and call it stability. Yet the only thing that has ever been yours is your judgment, your response, and your choice to act with reason or abandon it. If you are ready to stop living as a reaction to others and start living as a governed mind, stay here. Subscribe and walk with this practice daily, not as entertainment but as discipline for the inner life. This is not advice for comfort. It is instruction for clarity. We will train your attention, your silence, and your response until you can face any moment without losing yourself. Number 1. Protect your peace by controlling your judgments and reactions. Stop giving the world power over your mind. The moment you wake up and allow every comment, every glance, every delay, every insult, every imagined judgment to decide your inner state, you abandon the only place where your freedom has ever existed. No one is breaking your peace from the outside. You are handing it away through your judgments. You are reacting before you have even examined what you think. You are agreeing silently and instantly that external events are more powerful than your own reasoning. That agreement is not forced upon you. It is chosen in a fraction of a second, again and again, every day of your life. Your peace is not taken. It is surrendered in your interpretation. The world presents raw events. A word spoken, a message ignored, a plan disrupted, a person acting without respect. None of these things enter your mind as harm unless you judge them as harm. The disturbance is never in the thing itself. It is in your reaction to the thing. And if the disturbance is in your reaction, then the source of your suffering is within you, not outside you. This is where all honest self-examination begins. Not with blame, not with excuses, but with the simple recognition that your mind is involved in every single moment of your distress. Protecting your peace begins at the level of judgment. Not speech, not action, judgment. The silent decision your mind makes about what something means. You see an insult and you judge it as an injury. You experience delay and you judge it as misfortune. You witness someone's behavior and you judge it as disrespect directed at your worth. These judgments happen so fast that you believe they are reality itself, but they are not reality. They are interpretations layered over reality, and what is layered can be removed. What is added can be questioned. If you want peace, you must learn to pause before you agree with your first impression. That pause is where your life changes. In that space, you regain ownership of your mind. Without that pause, you are not living with reason. You are living as a reaction machine, shaped by everything around you. And a mind that reacts without examination is not free. It is carried. You must begin to observe how often you assign meaning without evidence. Someone does not reply to you and you decide they are disrespecting you. Someone speaks sharply and you decide they are attacking your value. Someone succeeds where you fail and you decide your worth has decreased. These are judgments, not truths. And every false judgment you accept becomes a wound you create in yourself. There is a discipline required here that most people avoid because it demands honesty without comfort. You must watch your first response and treat it as unreliable, not because you are broken, but because your mind has been trained by habit, emotion, and impulse, rather than reason. The first thought is often not the wise thought, it is the conditioned thought. And if you protect your peace, you will stop treating every thought as an authority. Start your day by preparing your mind for impressions. Before you enter the noise of people, messages, tasks, and demands, decide that nothing outside your control will define your state. You will see things, you will hear things, but you will not immediately agree with your interpretations. You will ask yourself one silent question before you react. Is this within my control or not? If it is not within your control, then it cannot harm your inner life unless you choose to judge it as harm. That is the boundary you must learn to defend. When someone speaks to you with anger, you do not need to answer with anger. You do not even need to decide immediately what their intent is. You need only recognize that their words are external events passing through your awareness. Your response is the only part that belongs to you. If you react without reflection, you become an extension of their state. If you respond with reason, you remain anchored in your own. Protecting your peace also requires you to stop rehearsing conversations in your mind that do not exist. Much of your suffering is self-created through imagined scenarios. You replay disrespect that did not fully occur as you think it did. You construct meanings that were never confirmed. You argue with people who are not present. In doing so, you live more in mental fiction than in reality. And a mind that lives in fiction cannot remain calm. Every time you notice this happening, return to what is actually in front of you, not what might have been intended, not what could happen later, not what you fear is being implied, only what is directly present. Stoic discipline is not emotional suppression, it is accuracy of perception. You are not trying to feel nothing, you are trying to see clearly. You must also become strict with the stories you tell about your worth. Your value is not determined by how others behave toward you. Their behavior is governed by their judgments, not your essence. If you tie your peace to their approval, you place your inner life under foreign control. And no rational person would voluntarily surrender their mind to the opinions of those who do not even govern their own. There is a quiet strength in refusing to escalate internally what does not deserve escalation. Someone cuts you off in conversation. Someone ignores your effort. Someone misunderstands your intention. These are moments where you either defend your peace or abandon it. Most people abandon it instantly. They inflate the moment, they assign meaning beyond what is present, they turn small events into identity wounds, and then they wonder why their mind is never still. You are not required to turn every moment into a verdict about yourself. You are allowed to let things remain small. A careless word is a careless word. A misunderstanding is a misunderstanding. A delay is a delay. Not everything is a test of your dignity. Not everything is a signal about your worth. Much of life is neutral until you make it heavy with judgment. If you want real transformation, you must practice separating impression from agreement. An impression enters, a judgment follows. You are responsible for the judgment, not the impression. Train yourself to notice the gap. At first it will be small, a fraction of awareness before reaction, but in that fraction lies your entire freedom. When you feel the rise of emotional disturbance, do not immediately speak, do not immediately act, do not immediately conclude. Return to observation. What is happening externally? What is happening internally? Name it without exaggeration, a feeling of irritation, a sense of disappointment, a surge of impatience. By naming it plainly, you reduce its power to define you. You are not the emotion, you are the observer of it. There is also discipline required in how you consume the judgments of others. Not every opinion deserves entry into your inner world. People speak from ignorance, from frustration, from insecurity, from incomplete understanding. If you treat every external opinion as worthy of shaping your self-view, you will never remain stable. You will be pulled in every direction by minds that are not even steady themselves. You must decide what is worthy of your attention. This is not arrogance, it is maintenance of mental order. A peaceful mind is not one that absorbs everything, it is one that filters according to reason. If something does not contribute to your ability to act with virtue, it does not deserve space in your inner life. Protecting your peace also means becoming aware of how often you react to imagined disrespect. Many conflicts are not born from actual harm, but from perceived slights, a tone interpreted incorrectly, a silence assumed to be rejection, a glance misread as judgment. If you do not question your interpretations, you will suffer constantly from events that may not even be real in the way you think they are. You must develop the habit of delaying conclusion. Not every situation needs immediate interpretation. Some things can remain undecided. You do not need to assign meaning instantly. The mind that rushes to conclusions is the mind that creates unnecessary suffering. The disciplined mind waits for clarity before it forms judgment. When you feel the urge to react, remind yourself that reaction is optional. It feels automatic only because you have practiced it without awareness. But anything practiced can be unlearned. You can train yourself to pause. You can train yourself to breathe into the space before response. You can train yourself to choose words instead of releasing them unconsciously. There is strength in silence when silence protects reason. Silence is not avoidance, it is control. It is the refusal to let impulse govern speech. Many of your past regrets were not caused by what others did, but by what you said without discipline. Every uncontrolled reaction is a future burden you create in the present moment. To protect your peace, you must also reduce your dependence on external validation. If your sense of stability rises and falls based on how others treat you, you are not stable, you are dependent, and dependence is the opposite of inner freedom. A mind governed by reason does not require constant approval to remain steady. You can acknowledge others without surrendering yourself to them. You can listen without absorbing. You can engage without losing your center. This balance is what most people fail to learn because they are trained to react socially rather than thoughtfully. But you are not required to live reactively. Every day gives you practice. Every interaction is training. Every moment of irritation is an opportunity to observe your own mind, not to judge it harshly, but to understand it clearly. You are not trying to eliminate disturbance by controlling the world. You are learning to remain steady regardless of the world. When you begin to live this way, you will notice something unsettling at first. The noise outside does not decrease. People do not suddenly become calmer. Situations do not stop challenging you. What changes is your involvement. You stop participating in unnecessary internal conflict. You stop agreeing with every emotional impulse. You stop expanding small events into suffering. That is what protecting your peace truly means. Not escaping life, not avoiding difficulty, but refusing to let unexamined judgment govern your experience of life. In time, you will see that silence is not emptiness, it is space for reason. Focus is not restriction, it is direction. Peace is not passivity, it is disciplined perception. And when you master your judgments, you are no longer controlled by circumstance, you are guided by understanding. End each day by reviewing how often you gave away your peace through unexamined reaction, not to punish yourself, but to see clearly. Where did you react too quickly? Where did you assume too much? Where did you believe your first interpretation without question? This honest review trains your awareness for the next day. Without it, you repeat unconscious patterns endlessly. You are always practicing something. Either you are practicing reaction or you are practicing reason. Either you are strengthening impulse or strengthening judgment. There is no neutral state. Every moment reinforces a direction. So choose carefully, not in theory but in real time. When the moment comes, when the message arrives, when the insult is spoken, when the delay occurs, when the unexpected happens, that is where your philosophy lives. Not in reading, not in agreement, in action. Protect your peace by controlling your judgments and reactions, not once, not occasionally, but as a continuous discipline of mind, because your life is not defined by what happens to you. It is defined by how many moments you remain governed by reason instead of impulse. And in that governance lies the only freedom worth having. Number 2. Accept what you cannot control and master yourself daily. You are not suffering because life is unfair. You are suffering because you are still trying to control what was never placed under your control. You resist outcomes that have already unfolded. You argue with reality in your mind after reality has already moved forward. You attach your peace to conditions that do not belong to you, and then you act surprised when your peace collapses. This is not misfortune. This is misunderstanding. There are things placed under your authority and things placed outside it. Your judgment, your intention, your response, your choice of action in this moment, your willingness to reflect and correct yourself, these belong to you. Everything else does not. Other people's behavior does not belong to you. Their opinions do not belong to you. Their approval does not belong to you. The outcome of your efforts does not fully belong to you. Even your body, in many ways, does not obey your commands with absolute certainty. Yet you live as if all of it is yours to command, and when it refuses you, you suffer as though you have been betrayed. The first act of clarity is to stop negotiating with reality. What has happened has happened. What others choose has been chosen. What is outside your control is already beyond your reach, no matter how much mental energy you spend trying to reshape it after the fact. Your mind may replay it, resist it, or resent it, but none of these responses change the fact that it is not yours to govern. Acceptance is not weakness. It is precision. It is the recognition that your power has boundaries and that wisdom begins where illusion ends. A person who refuses to accept what is not theirs to control is not strong. They are constantly in conflict with existence itself, and no one wins that conflict. You are not asked to approve of everything that happens. You are asked to see it clearly without distortion. There is a difference between judgment and clarity. Judgment adds emotional resistance. Clarity removes illusion. When you see things as they are, you stop exhausting yourself fighting what cannot be altered. Most of your mental suffering does not come from events. It comes from the refusal to accept that events are already complete. You imagine that if you think about them enough, worry about them enough, or replay them enough, you will regain influence over them. But thought cannot reach into the past and change it. Thought cannot reach into another mind and force it to act differently. Thought cannot bend external conditions into compliance. It can only shape your present response. And when you misuse thought, you turn your own mind into a place of unnecessary conflict. The discipline required here is simple but not easy. You must repeatedly return your attention to what is yours, not as an idea, but as a practice throughout the day. When frustration arises, ask whether what you are reacting to is within your control. If it is not, then your reaction is directed at the wrong target. You are striking at something that cannot be moved, and every strike leaves exhaustion in you, not change in it. You do not master life by controlling outcomes. You master life by controlling yourself in relation to outcomes. That distinction is everything. A person who remains calm when plans collapse is not indifferent. They are disciplined. A person who does not crumble when others fail to meet expectations is not naive. They are trained in reality. Each morning, before you engage with the world, you must set the structure of your mind. You decide in advance that you will not treat external events as injuries. You will treat them as material for your response. You will not demand that the day obey your preferences. You will prepare to meet whatever arrives with reason rather than resistance. This is not optimism, it is readiness. As the day unfolds, impressions will attempt to pull you into reactions, a message that disrupts your plan. A person who behaves differently than expected, a situation that unfolds without your consent. In each moment, your task is not to correct reality instantly, but to correct your interpretation of it. Pause the automatic assumption that something has gone wrong simply because it did not go your way. Often what you call wrong is simply what you did not anticipate. You must train yourself to separate the event from the story you attach to it. The event is neutral. The story is where suffering is constructed. When you say something should not have happened, you are not describing reality, you are resisting it. And resistance drains your strength without producing change. Acceptance is not passive surrender. It is the clearing of internal noise so that right action can be taken. If something is within your control, you act. If it is not, you release it. But most people do neither. They half act and half resist. They remain mentally entangled in what they claim to have moved past. That division destroys focus. Mastery of yourself begins with honesty about your limits. You are not the ruler of other people's decisions. You are not the architect of external events. You are the governor of your own judgments and actions. When you confuse these roles, you become restless. When you respect them, you become steady. You will notice that much of your mental unrest comes from trying to mentally complete unfinished situations. You want people to behave differently in your memory. You want past conversations to unfold with better outcomes in hindsight. You want external events to align with your internal preferences. But reality does not revise itself to match regret. It continues forward without reference to your internal resistance. The disciplined mind stops trying to edit what has already been written. It asks instead what can be done now, in this moment, with what is available. This shift from resistance to response is where your strength begins to form. There is also a hidden form of control you must abandon. The belief that if you think hard enough about future outcomes, you can guarantee them. This creates constant anxiety disguised as preparation. You live in imagined scenarios where you attempt to manage every variable in advance. But life does not unfold according to mental rehearsal. It unfolds according to conditions you cannot fully predict. Preparation is useful when it focuses on your conduct, not on controlling outcomes. You prepare your discipline, not your certainty. You prepare your attention, not your guarantee of success. You prepare your judgment, not the behavior of others. Throughout the day, every irritation is an invitation to return to this principle. Not everything requires a response. Not every discomfort requires correction. Sometimes the correct action is simply to allow the moment to be what it is without adding resistance to it. This is not avoidance. It is mental economy. You preserve your energy for what is actually within your reach. When you feel frustration rising, examine whether you are trying to control what is not yours. That simple recognition weakens the emotional grip. You see that your struggle is not with the event, but with your expectation of how the event should have unfolded. Expectations are internal constructions. They can be adjusted. Reality cannot be negotiated. You are not asked to remove ambition or effort. You are asked to remove attachment to outcomes as a condition for peace. You can strive fully and still remain detached from the result. That is not contradiction. It is discipline. Your effort belongs to you. The result does not. This understanding must be practiced repeatedly until it becomes instinct. At first you will forget, you will react, you will resist, but each time you notice it, you return. You return not with guilt, but with correction. The practice is not perfection. The practice is awareness, followed by adjustment. Even your failures become useful when viewed correctly, not as evidence of deficiency, but as data about where your control ends and your reaction begins. Every moment you lose composure reveals where you still believe you control what you do not. That belief is what must be corrected, not punished. You are always in training. Every situation is part of that training. Nothing is wasted if you are willing to observe yourself honestly, but if you refuse to observe, everything becomes repeated suffering. As the day ends, Examine where you resisted reality instead of working within it. Where did you try to mentally force outcomes that were already decided? Where did you waste energy arguing internally with what had already occurred? Where did you forget your boundaries of control and step into frustration that belonged to no useful purpose? This reflection is not meant to disturb you. It is meant to refine you. The goal is not to feel harshness toward yourself, but to see clearly where your attention was misplaced. Clarity leads to correction. Correction leads to steadiness. A person who understands what is theirs and what is not theirs becomes difficult to disturb, not because life becomes easier, but because their expectations become accurate, and accurate expectations remove unnecessary suffering. You will still experience difficulty. You will still encounter resistance from the world, but you will no longer multiply that difficulty through internal opposition to what is already real. You will meet events as they are, not as you demand them to be. That is the beginning of mastery. Not control over life, but control over the self in relation to life. Not domination of circumstances, but discipline of interpretation. Not rejection of reality, but alignment with it. And in that alignment, you find a steadiness that does not depend on outcomes. A peace that does not rise and fall with events. A strength that is not borrowed from the world, but built through the daily return to reason. Number 3. Silence your mind before responding to external disturbances. You keep losing control of yourself in moments that last only seconds. A comment, a delay, a glance, a tone, a sudden inconvenience enters your awareness, and immediately your mind rushes forward without discipline. It judges too quickly, it concludes too early, it speaks internally before understanding anything clearly. That is not strength. That is an untrained mind exposing itself at every disturbance. Silence is not the absence of sound. Silence is the removal of internal noise before you respond to what is outside you. Most people believe they are responding to the world, but in truth they are responding to their own uncontrolled thoughts about the world. The event is brief. The interpretation is where the chaos begins. You are not reacting to reality itself. You are reacting to the story your mind produces before reason has time to intervene. There is a gap between what happens and how you respond. That gap is where your character either forms or collapses. When that gap is ignored, impulse takes command. When that gap is observed, reason has a chance to govern. Your task is not to eliminate external disturbance. That will never happen. Your task is to refuse immediate agreement with your first internal reaction. Every disturbance enters your mind as raw perception. It has no moral weight, no final meaning, no inherent threat until you assign one, but you assign meaning so quickly that you forget you are the one assigning it. Someone interrupts you, and instantly you decide you are disrespected. Something fails, and instantly you decide you are unlucky. A situation changes, and instantly you decide things are going wrong. These are not facts. These are unexamined conclusions. The disciplined mind does not obey its first interpretation. It pauses. It holds the impression without endorsement. It refuses to speak internally until clarity arrives. That pause is the beginning of silence. Not silence from the world, but silence from premature judgment. If you examine your daily reactions, you will see how often you are not thinking at all. You are repeating mental habits formed by past frustration. You are reacting as if every situation demands immediate meaning, but not every situation deserves immediate interpretation. Many situations require observation first, response later. When you rush to respond internally, you hand authority to your most unstable mental state. That state is shaped by emotion, fatigue, expectation, and memory. It is not reliable, and yet most people treat it as truth. They feel something and assume it is correct simply because it is immediate. But immediacy is not accuracy. Immediacy is simply speed without reflection. Silencing your mind before response means refusing to let emotional noise define the first version of reality you accept. You see what happens, but you do not yet decide what it means. You hold it in awareness without judgment until reason has examined it. That is where control begins to return. Most suffering is created in the space where interpretation is automatic. A neutral event enters, and within seconds your mind constructs meaning that harms you. Someone does not respond and you construct rejection. Someone speaks briefly and you construct hostility. Someone succeeds and you construct comparison that diminishes you. None of this is given by reality. It is generated internally without supervision. The practice is to interrupt this generation process, not by force, but by attention. You notice the first movement of interpretation, and you do not obey it. You let it exist without granting it authority. This is how silence is trained, not by suppression of thought, but by refusal to act on thought before examination. You must also learn that not every mental voice deserves participation. Your mind will offer explanations instantly for everything. It will try to complete unfinished information with assumptions. It will try to fill uncertainty with conclusions. But certainty created too quickly is often false certainty. And false certainty is the root of unnecessary disturbance. A quiet mind is not an empty mind. It is a disciplined mind that refuses to multiply interpretations beyond necessity. It allows events to remain simple until reason determines complexity is required. Most people do the opposite. They turn simple events into complex emotional narratives before any real understanding exists. To silence your mind before responding, you must begin noticing the physical urgency that comes with emotional reaction. The impulse to speak, to judge, to reply, to mentally attack or defend. That urgency is not guidance, it is pressure. And pressure is not truth, it is simply intensity. You are not required to obey intensity. In practice, this means delaying internal agreement. When something occurs, you do not immediately decide what it says about you or others. You hold the moment. You let it remain unfinished in your mind. You observe your own reaction as something separate from reality itself. That separation is essential. Without it, you confuse emotion with understanding. The undisciplined mind believes silence is inaction. The disciplined mind understands silence is control over reaction. There is a difference between suppressing expression and withholding premature judgment. One is repression, the other is clarity. You are not trying to become passive. You are trying to become accurate. Throughout your day, countless opportunities arise to practice this. Someone speaks sharply. Someone behaves unpredictably. A plan changes without warning. In each case, your mind will attempt to respond immediately. That immediate response is where your training must intervene, not by fighting the moment, but by stepping back into observation before conclusion. You begin to recognize how often your suffering is not caused by events themselves, but by your refusal to let events be understood slowly. You demand instant meaning from life, and when instant meaning produces distortion, you suffer from your own speed. Slowness in judgment is not weakness, it is stability. There is also a deeper discipline required. You must learn to silence internal commentary that continues after an event has passed. Many people do not experience disturbance once. They experience it repeatedly through mental replay. They re-enter the moment, reinterpret it, re-argue it, and re-feel it without any new information. This is not reflection. This is uncontrolled repetition. True reflection happens once clarity has replaced emotion. Before that point, repetition only strengthens disturbance. The disciplined mind recognizes when thinking has shifted from analysis to reliving. At that moment, it stops and returns to the present. You cannot build inner stability while continuously reactivating past impressions. Each replay strengthens attachment to the interpretation rather than releasing it into understanding. Silence must extend beyond the moment of reaction. It must include the refusal to reopen settled impressions without reason. Each morning offers an opportunity to prepare this discipline. Before engaging with others, you set a clear intention not to trust immediate interpretation. You remind yourself that your first mental response is not final. You commit to observing before concluding. This is not affirmation. It is training. As the day progresses, you will forget this intention many times. That is expected. The practice is not perfection. The practice is recognition. Each time you notice you have reacted too quickly, you return. You do not condemn yourself. You correct yourself. That return is the work. Over time, you begin to see a shift. External events lose their ability to instantly destabilize you, not because they change, but because your participation in immediate reaction weakens. You no longer give every disturbance full access to your inner world. You create space where reason can enter before judgment is formed. This space becomes the foundation of calm action. When you respond from silence rather than impulse, your words carry clarity instead of excess. Your decisions carry stability instead of fluctuation. Your relationships become less reactive because you are no longer adding unnecessary meaning to every interaction. Silence before response is not withdrawal from life. It is entry into life with awareness intact. You are no longer dragged by interpretation. You are guiding interpretation through reason. This is where true self-governance begins. You will still feel disturbance. That is not the problem. The problem is immediate identification with disturbance. Feeling is natural. Automatic belief in feeling is not. The disciplined mind allows sensation to arise without allowing it to dictate judgment. Every moment becomes practice. Every interruption becomes training. Every emotional surge becomes an opportunity to observe whether you still obey your first reaction. And slowly, through repetition, obedience weakens and awareness strengthens. At the end of each day, you review where silence was maintained and where it was lost. Not to measure failure, but to refine attention. You observe where you spoke internally too quickly, where you accepted interpretations without pause, where you allowed noise to replace clarity. This review strengthens the next day's discipline. What you are building is not emotional suppression, but mental sovereignty. A mind that does not belong to every passing impression, a mind that does not speak before understanding, a mind that does not confuse speed with wisdom. Silence your mind before responding to external disturbances, and you begin to see that most of what once controlled you had no authority beyond your immediate agreement, and once that agreement weakens, so does your disturbance. Number 4. Examine your thoughts and choose reason over impulse today. You are not disturbed by life. You are disturbed by your unexamined thoughts about life. What enters your awareness is not the problem. What you conclude about it without inspection is the problem. A single impression passes through your mind and immediately becomes a judgment, then a reaction, then a feeling you believe is truth. You do not pause long enough to ask whether what you are thinking deserves authority. That lack of examination is where your instability begins. Your mind produces thoughts constantly, but not every thought is worth obedience. Some thoughts are inherited from habit, some are shaped by fear, some are formed in moments of fatigue or frustration, yet you often treat them as if they are final verdicts about reality. You confuse mental activity with insight, you confuse speed with accuracy, and in that confusion you allow impulse to govern what reason was meant to guide. To examine your thoughts is to step back from automatic agreement. It is to observe what arises in your mind without immediately granting it legitimacy. A thought appears that someone disrespected you. Another thought appears that your situation is unfair. Another thought appears that you are falling behind. None of these thoughts carry proof simply by existing. They are impressions, not truths. If you fail to examine them, you absorb them as identity, and then you act as if they define your reality. Most people never separate thought from truth. They experience an internal sentence and assume it is correct because it feels immediate. But immediacy is not reliability. A thought can arise in an instant and still be false. Reason requires time. Impulse demands none. If you consistently choose what is instant over what is examined, you are not living by reason. You are living by reaction. Examination begins with distance. You must learn to see your thoughts as objects of observation rather than commands. A thought is not an order. It is not an obligation. It is a mental occurrence that requires evaluation. When you fail to evaluate it, you allow it to direct your behavior without consent. That is not freedom. That is mental surrender. You are already practicing examination, but in the wrong direction. You examine other people's actions. You analyze their intentions. You interpret their behavior. But you rarely apply that same scrutiny inward. You trust your interpretation of others more than you question your interpretation of your own mind. This imbalance creates constant error in judgment. The disciplined mind turns scrutiny inward first. Before judging the world, it judges its own interpretation of the world. Before concluding about others, it examines the thought that formed the conclusion. This reversal is where clarity begins to form. Without it, you live inside assumptions you never challenged. When a thought arises, you must begin asking whether it is based on evidence or emotion, whether it is formed in clarity or in reaction, whether it serves reason or serves impulse. Most thoughts that disturb you are not rooted in truth but in emotional momentum. They feel convincing because they are emotionally charged, not because they are accurate. Impulse thrives in unexamined space. It grows stronger when left unquestioned. If you do not interrupt it, it becomes action. And once impulse becomes action, you inherit consequences you did not consciously choose. That is how people repeatedly act against their own interest while believing they are making decisions. Reason is not passive. It must be actively chosen against impulse. This choice happens in real time, in the space between thought and action. That space is where your life is governed. If you do not occupy it with awareness, impulse occupies it for you. To choose reason over impulse today, you must slow your internal response long enough to observe what you are about to accept. You are not required to believe every interpretation that arises. You are not required to act on every emotional surge. You are not required to finalize meaning immediately. You can hold the thought without committing to it. This holding is not suppression. It is inspection. You allow the thought to exist without turning it into action or identity. You observe its structure. You see whether it is exaggeration, assumption, memory distortion, or emotional projection. Most disturbing thoughts collapse under simple observation because they are not built on stable reasoning. Your daily suffering often comes from accepting incomplete thoughts as complete truths. A partial understanding becomes a full conclusion in your mind without verification. You assume intent without evidence. You assume permanence from temporary events. You assume meaning from isolated incidents. These assumptions accumulate and shape your emotional life more than reality itself. The practice of examination disrupts this accumulation. It breaks the chain from impression to belief to reaction. It forces a pause where accuracy can enter. Without this pause, your mind behaves like a system that executes commands without checking their validity. Each morning, before you engage with the world, you should prepare your mind for examination, not by controlling what thoughts will arise, but by committing to questioning them. You decide in advance that no thought will be accepted without scrutiny. This is not doubt for its own sake. It is discipline of understanding. As the day unfolds, thoughts will appear rapidly. Some will be about your worth, some about others' behavior, some about your progress or lack of it. Each one will attempt to position itself as urgent, but urgency is not truth. Urgency is pressure, and pressure is not a guide for judgment. When urgency appears, that is your signal to slow down mentally, not to ignore the situation, but to inspect the thought driving your reaction. What exactly are you assuming? What exactly are you concluding? What exactly is the evidence? Most of the time, these questions reveal that the thought is incomplete, exaggerated, or entirely speculative. Reason does not react quickly. It builds understanding step by step. That is why impulse often feels stronger in the moment. It arrives faster, but speed is not strength. A fast conclusion is often a fragile one. A slow conclusion is often a stable one. You must also examine how often your thoughts revolve around control you do not possess. You think about how others should behave. You think about how events should unfold. You think about how situations should have gone differently. These are thoughts of control over what is not yours to control. And every time you entertain them without challenge, you generate unnecessary frustration. Examination brings you back to the boundary of your influence. It forces you to see clearly what is yours and what is not. Once that boundary is clear, impulse loses much of its power because most impulsive reactions are based on trying to control what cannot be controlled. You will notice that many of your strongest emotional reactions come from thoughts that were never questioned. A single assumption becomes a belief becomes a feeling becomes an action, and the original assumption is never examined. That is how error compounds silently in the mind. To interrupt this pattern, you must develop the habit of questioning your first interpretation, not rejecting it, but testing it, asking whether it holds up under reason, asking whether it is complete or partial, asking whether it is necessary to act on it immediately or at all. Over time, this practice changes the structure of your mind. You stop being a receiver of thoughts and become an evaluator of thoughts. You stop reacting as if every mental event is authoritative. You begin to recognize that thoughts are raw material, not commands. This shift reduces unnecessary suffering because much of what disturbs you is not reality itself, but unchallenged interpretation. When interpretation is examined, many disturbances lose their foundation. What remains is clearer, simpler, and easier to respond to with composure. At the end of each day, you review where impulse governed you and where reason intervened, not to judge yourself, but to see the pattern of your mind with honesty. You observe where you accepted thoughts too quickly, where you failed to question interpretation, where you allowed emotion to finalize conclusions without inspection. This review is not punishment, it is training in awareness. Each observation strengthens your ability to recognize impulse earlier the next time it arises. Gradually, the gap between thought and response widens. In that widening space, reason gains strength. You are always choosing between two forces within you. One rushes toward immediate interpretation and reaction. The other seeks understanding before action. One creates quick certainty that often leads to error. The other builds slower clarity that leads to stability. Your life is shaped by which one you repeatedly obey. To examine your thoughts and choose reason over impulse today is to reclaim that choice consciously instead of leaving it to habit. It is to refuse automatic agreement with every mental impression. It is to return authority to the part of you that sees more clearly than reaction ever will. And in that return, you begin to live with a steadiness that does not depend on circumstances being easy, but on your mind being disciplined enough to meet them with clarity instead of impulse. Number 5. Guard your attention and focus only on your actions. You are losing your life in fragments of attention you never consciously chose. Your mind does not remain where your body is. It jumps to what others are doing. It drifts into what others think. It attaches itself to outcomes you cannot control and situations you cannot influence. In doing so, you abandon the only domain that was ever placed under your authority, which is your own action in the present moment. Attention is not passive. It is a form of power distribution. Wherever your attention goes, your life energy follows. If you scatter it across external events, you become scattered internally. If you surrender it to comparison, judgment, and speculation, you lose clarity over what is actually yours to do. The result is a mind constantly occupied but rarely directed. You must understand this clearly. What you attend to shapes what you become aware of. What you become aware of shapes what you believe matters. What you believe matters shapes what you choose, and what you choose defines the structure of your life. If your attention is mismanaged, your entire existence becomes misaligned without you noticing the transition. Most people believe their suffering comes from external conditions. In truth, their suffering often comes from how frequently their attention leaves their own actions. They are mentally present everywhere except where responsibility actually exists. They observe others more than they observe themselves. They analyze situations more than they examine their own conduct within those situations. Guarding your attention begins with recognizing that not every stimulus deserves entry into your awareness. Much of what you consume mentally is not necessary for your growth. Much of what you observe in others is irrelevant to your character. Yet you allow it constant access, and then you wonder why your mind feels restless and divided. A disciplined mind is not one that sees everything. It is one that chooses what is worth seeing. It filters external noise through the question of usefulness to action. If something does not help you act with clarity, it does not deserve sustained attention. Not everything that appears is worthy of engagement. You must also confront how often your attention is directed toward evaluation of things you cannot influence. You monitor outcomes that are already unfolding without your input. You analyze people who are not under your control. You speculate about future events that have not arrived. This constant outward projection weakens your ability to act effectively in the present because your attention is never fully available where action is required. The present moment is the only place where action exists, yet your attention frequently escapes it. It goes into memory and creates regret. It goes into imagination and creates anxiety. It goes into comparison and creates dissatisfaction. None of these movements improve your capacity to act. They only fragment it. To guard your attention is to bring it back repeatedly to what you are doing now, not what you should have done, not what others are doing, not what may happen later, only what is directly in front of your capacity to influence through action. This is where discipline begins to take shape. Your actions are the only domain that belongs fully to you. Not outcomes, not recognition, not others' interpretations, only your actions. Yet you often neglect this domain while investing energy into everything surrounding it. You evaluate results without refining action. You desire outcomes without guarding attention. You want control over what is external while ignoring control over what is internal. This imbalance is the source of much dissatisfaction. You are focused on life as it appears, rather than life as it is being constructed through your choices. Every action you take is shaping a direction, but you often take those actions without full awareness because your attention is elsewhere. Guarding your attention requires withdrawal from unnecessary mental participation in external affairs, not physical withdrawal but cognitive withdrawal. You remain present in situations without allowing your mind to drift into judgment of what does not require your input. You observe without unnecessary interpretation. You act without unnecessary distraction. When you notice your attention drifting toward what others are doing or thinking, you must recognize that you are leaving your own responsibility unattended. There is no benefit in attending to what you cannot govern while neglecting what you can govern. That is not awareness, that is misallocation. Each day presents countless opportunities to reclaim attention. In conversations, you can choose to listen with presence rather than silently evaluating yourself or others. In work, you can choose to focus on the action being performed rather than the outcome it may or may not produce. In solitude, you can choose to observe your thoughts without letting them carry you into unnecessary narratives. Your mind will resist this discipline at first. It prefers movement over stability. It prefers external engagement over internal responsibility. It finds comfort in distraction because distraction prevents self-examination. But comfort is not alignment, and distraction is not living. To focus only on your actions means you return repeatedly to the question of what is currently under your control to do, not what is outside your influence, not what others should do differently, only what your next correct action is. This orientation simplifies life. Complexity arises when attention spreads across what is not yours to manage. You begin to see that many emotional reactions are tied to misplaced attention. When your attention rests on others' behavior, you become reactive. When your attention rests on imagined outcomes, you become anxious. When your attention rests on comparison, you become dissatisfied. None of these states originate from action itself. They originate from where your attention has wandered. A stable mind is built through repeated returns, not through permanent focus, but through consistent correction. Each time attention drifts outward unnecessarily, you bring it back. Each time it attaches to what is not yours, you redirect it to what is yours. This repeated return is the foundation of inner order. You are not required to eliminate external awareness. You are required to prioritize internal responsibility. There is a difference between observing life and being consumed by it. Observation supports action. Consumption replaces action with reaction. Before you begin your day, you must set the intention that your attention will serve your actions, not your distractions. You are not entering the day to monitor everything. You are entering the day to act with precision where your responsibility exists. This intention is not symbolic. It is corrective. It reorients your mind toward usefulness. As the day unfolds, every moment becomes a test of attention. Will you remain in your own actions or drift into unnecessary mental territory? Will you stay with what you are doing or abandon it for speculation and comparison? These decisions happen constantly, often unnoticed, but they determine the quality of your inner life. You will fail to maintain this focus many times at first. That is expected. The discipline is not in never losing attention. The discipline is in recognizing when you have lost it and returning without delay. Each return strengthens awareness. Each drift reveals where training is still needed. Guarding your attention also requires honesty about what drains it. Certain patterns of thinking repeatedly pull you away from action. Unnecessary evaluation of others, excessive concern with outcomes, internal commentary that does not lead to action. These patterns must be recognized not as identity, but as habits that can be corrected. When attention is guarded properly, even simple actions gain clarity. You become fully present in what you are doing instead of